On this episode, the port in wartime. We'll look at key roles the port has played in the story of Los Angeles and our nation during times of crisis. We'll hop aboard the USS Iowa and take a trip back in time. And kids at the Port of LA will visit the SS Lane Victory and learn about the Merchant Marines. Welcome to Portfolio. I'm Andrew Tarr, and this is the USS Iowa. The battleship USS Iowa was launched over 70 years ago and now has a permanent home here on the LA waterfront. We thought it would be the perfect place to start our journey through the Port of LA in wartime. In this episode, we're going to take a look at the critical role the Port of LA, even from its beginnings as Banning's Landing, has played during wartime. From the Civil War to World War I and World War II, the port has always made a difference. This is the Drum Barracks Civil War Museum, housed in the last remaining structure of a sprawling military base in Wilmington. Though California was part of the United States, the actual allegiance of California during the Civil War was in question. There was serious concern that the Confederacy would attempt to not only seize the state's gold fields, but could also establish a port in San Pedro, circumventing the blockade that was crippling its efforts in the east. On land donated by Phineas Banning, the father of the Port of Los Angeles and the founder of Banning's Landing, the base eventually served over 8,000 soldiers and prevented the Confederacy from achieving a foothold in the state. With the Civil War out of the way, the city and the port continued to develop. By the early 20th century, the port's growth and growing tensions with the Japanese led to the creation of coastal defenses. From 1919 to 1940, San Pedro was the home base of the Pacific Fleet, eventually consisting of 14 battleships, 2 aircraft carriers, 14 cruisers, and 16 support ships. But even before the fleet arrived, the port and the coast were already being protected. With the port's growing importance, the federal government opened a harbor defense installation, Fort MacArthur.
The port and the fort go hand in hand. Well, the primary reason for coastal fortifications is because the major threat to any country's commerce was raiding shipping. And so in order to protect your harbors, being a vital place for shipping, you had to put fortifications around your harbors to protect them from marauding foreign countries that might want to do you harm. Well, they knew the harbor was going to be built, and then when it finally was completed, it was sort of, hey, let's get this place fortified soon because we're a sitting duck without any fortification. The main threat to Los Angeles Harbor were these giant battleships called dreadnoughts, and they had very large guns on them, 14 to 15-inch guns that could reach, conceivably 20 miles. So Fort MacArthur had to have comparable armament to the battleships that existed at the time, which was basically 4 14-inch what they called disappearing rifles, and these were essentially battleship guns that were designed to do battle with these armored dreadnoughts. The main armament of Fort MacArthur was situated in 2 batteries, Battery Osgood Farley and Battery Leary Merriam. At the time they were built, each was a separate battery. Later they joined them together and hyphenated the name. Basically consisted of 2 14-inch disappearing rifles at both positions, one covering the southeast approach to the harbor, one protecting the northwest approach to the harbor. During the interwar years, President Roosevelt knew that the United States was going to get involved in World War II. So during the state of limited emergency, he built a series of barracks buildings topside, mess halls, things to accommodate a rapid growth in military numbers. And so our fort was actually prepared when World War II came around for a massive influx of troops. But despite all that preparedness, we still had more troops than we knew what to do with. For example, the peacetime garrison was about 1,800, and the wartime garrison in the spring of '42 was about 30,000. After the war, the main threat no longer was sort of ships at sea raiding your harbors, but it was more of an air attack. And so you had a primary focus of Fort MacArthur as an anti-aircraft position, starting out with guns, and then as the technology developed, they moved into the missile era, and that's when they used the Nike Ajax and Nike Hercules air defense systems. And again, Fort MacArthur became sort of the hub, or the headquarters, if you will, of the Los Angeles air defense system. Maybe something that is forgotten often as we drive home. I drive home across the bridges every day, and we look at this vast expanse of shipping containers and commerce going back and forth. And the thing I like people to remember is the fact that we are so successful commercially, and the fact that we have such a good fort may in fact rest upon the fact that we had an excellent defense system throughout the 20th century to protect all of this investment. So for me, the port and the fort go hand in hand.
Former Mayor James Hahn recalls a favorite war story from his father, legendary LA County Supervisor Kenneth Hahn. Though he served at the Port of Los Angeles during World War II, Kenneth Hahn nearly saw action on the home front.
He said, well, you go to officer candidate school, and he went back to Notre Dame and was one of those 90-day wonders. So he was very excited about what his first commission would be. He comes out as an ensign, and they say, guess what, Kenny? You're going back to your hometown. You're going back to be a pilot at the San Pedro Harbor. And he thought, well, gee, that's not exactly what I thought I was going to do when I signed up to be in the war, but that's okay. My dad loved to tell this story that as you know, the Navy pilot, and of course we're in wartime, you know, everything was had to be top security, and so they would run up code flags on the vessel after the pilots would meet the ship outside the breakwater. And every day, I think the code book was changed naturally for security reasons. And for some reason, my dad said he had the wrong day's code book, and he ran up the flags that he thought he was supposed to run up as he brought the ship in. And unfortunately, the flags that he ran up read "Enemy ship approaching." And as he steamed into the channel with this Russian freighter, I think it was, he suddenly noticed the guns at Fort MacArthur were being trained on the vessel he was on, and alarms were going off, and he had no idea what was happening. And lucky for him, a friend of his who, a little more senior here at the port, a man named Baldo Kristovich, kind of knew my dad and knew he probably could got things wrong from time to time. Said, hey, that's Ensign Hahn, that's Kenny on board. Stand down, this one's okay.
World War II changed the landscape of the Port of Los Angeles as it became a critical center for shipbuilding, employing over 90,000 people. Shipbuilding was the economic engine of San Pedro throughout the war. It was hard work and paid well, and offered incredible opportunity. More importantly, it was part of the home front that helped win the war. Hundreds of new ships were built, as others were repaired and converted for wartime use.
There were so many people at that time had came off of the Depression days, and that was a good job for everybody. And why they hired a little old boy like me, I could never figure out.
I was the 108th man hired out of 55,000. See, these ships were built on an assembly line, and the plates came in from the steel mill, and then they were put in a warehouse. Every piece on the ship had a mark where it went. We had parts for 30 ships. We delivered almost a ship a day. I think 32 a month. We had a launch on almost every night. See, we put the knives and forks and everything on the ship and put the crew on the ship before it left. And that would run about 26 days. But toward the end, we were making up the beds and everything. And then if everything worked good, they hoisted a new broom up on top of the mast, and meaning a clean sweep.
I'm here with the USS Iowa's Hal Puritz, who's offered to give me and you a special VIP tour of the ship. How you doing, Hal?
Very well.
So tell me a little bit about why the USS Iowa is here at the Port of Los Angeles.
There's a lot of history of battleships here in the San Pedro Bay area. Back in 1920, the Pacific Fleet's battleships were all home ported right out here in the outer harbor.
Got it.
They stayed there up until just prior to being sent to Pearl Harbor. And we all know what happened to the ships when they were over there.
Right.
Now in the 80s, we also had battleships here in San Pedro Bay area, actually just across the in Terminal Island. The USS New Jersey and Missouri were both modernized and home ported throughout the 80s into the 90s.
Really? And the New Jersey and the Missouri are similar to the Iowa, is that right?
They're both Iowa-class battleships, the same size of this ship, same capabilities.
Got it. Ah, the main deck of the USS Iowa. Hal, tell us a little bit about what makes this ship unique among battleships.
Well, the obvious is these large naval guns. These guns have a diameter, their bore diameter is 16 inches. These gun barrels are about 68 feet long. There's 3 guns in each turret. There's 3 turrets on board. Each gun weighs 292,000 pounds. This turret here weighs 2,000 tons just by itself. Wow. That's the weight of a World War II destroyer.
And just this turret alone?
Yeah, the gun house behind us, the guns, the whole works.
Wow.
And there's 3 of them on board the ship.
The mighty new battleship Iowa has now joined the United States Navy in active duty. In pictures just released, made during the 45,000-ton warship's testing cruise, the Iowa's commander, Captain McCrae, orders her 9 16-inch guns to fire a mighty salvo.
This ship can travel 33 knots. That's about 40 miles per hour. This is the fastest battleship ever built.
The Iowa is the fastest
Iowa-class battleship. The Iowa and our sister ships, the New Jersey, Missouri, and Wisconsin, can travel 33 knots per hour.
Wow. Now this is essentially the bullet that those guns fire, is that right?
Yes, this is one of 2 types of projectiles that we fire out of the gun. This is the smaller 19,000 pound.
This is the smaller one?
This is the smaller one. This is the 1,900 pound high capacity explosive shell that's used for shore bombardment.
Okay.
And then behind it are the 6 bags of powder. Each bag weighs 110 pounds. It has smokeless powder in it. This will send this projectile 24 miles downrange. And at that maximum range, it takes 1.5 minutes from the time it leaves the muzzle till the time it hits the target.
This is airborne for 1.5 minutes?
That's correct.
And it weighs how much?
1,900 pounds.
See, I don't even think I could keep this off the ground for more than a second.
Well, with all this powder behind it, there's no problem getting it underway.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
One of the Iowa's most famous roles was helping transport President Franklin Roosevelt to the historic 1943 Tehran Conference.
This is the captain's in-port cabin. This is a lot of history in this room. This is where President Roosevelt stayed in his journey across the Atlantic.
So he lived in this room?
Yes, this is the outer office in here. Right through that passageway, you're going to get a chance to see the living quarters that he used.
And this table here is where he would sit and meet with his advisors?
This is the table he met with all his top military leaders. This is actually one of our most popular attractions aboard the ship. This is the bathtub that was put in just for President Roosevelt. As you know, President Roosevelt had polio and he was in a wheelchair and couldn't stand. So they made several modifications to the ship. This is the one modification that is still on board today. They took the shower out and put a bathtub in its place just for President Roosevelt.
One of the benefits to being a VIP like we are is that Hal has taken us off route to one of the secret areas of the ship. Hal, where exactly are we?
We're on the 3rd deck. This passageway is known as Broadway. It's 256 feet long. There are 9 bulkheads that have watertight doors that can be closed in case of flooding or battle damage. And this is where all the critical infrastructure of the ship is located. We have our engine rooms here, our evaporators, our fire rooms, our generators. Anything really important to keep the ship moving and is it down in this location right here.
So this is the bridge?
Yes, it is.
Now, I see the captain's chair, but I do not see the actual wheel. How does he steer the ship?
That's because we have the wheel behind 17 inches of armor in this armored conning tower that you see right here. This inside there would be the helmsman, the lee helmsman. These are the men that are actually steering the ship, sending the signals to the engine room on how fast to go. They get their direction from out here, and they control the ship from in there. And when the ship goes into general quarters or battle stations, the captain or whoever else needs to be in there with them will also go in there, and they'll close this 4,000-pound door behind them, and they're as safe as you can be on the ship. Okay, we're passing through the 17 inches of armor.
Yep, that looks about 17 inches. And this must be the helm.
You're correct.
And this must be the wheel.
That's the wheel.
I have an eye for that kind of thing.
Good catch.
So, how does the helmsman see where he's going? There are no windows.
Well, the helmsman doesn't have to look out the window. All he's concerned about is his gyro compass repeater and keeping the ship on whatever course he's been given, either by the captain or whoever the officer in charge is out on the bridge.
So he's counting on the officer in charge out there to give him instructions, and he just listens and...
Correct. He's getting that order and watching his compass repeater and just keeping the ship on that course, whatever it was.
Got it. Hal, I'd like to thank you again for our VIP tour of the USS Iowa here at the Port of Los Angeles. Now remember, this has just been a small taste of everything there is to see here on the ship and everything there will be to see in the coming months and years. So come on down to Berth 87 at the Port of Los Angeles and take your own tour of the USS Iowa. Who knows, maybe you'll even meet Hal here. Thanks again, Hal.
You're welcome, Andrew.
Today, the Port of Los Angeles is the busiest container port in the United States, spreading over 7,500 acres of land and water. Though it's one of the most technologically advanced ports in the world, it still pays tribute to its long and proud history. At Battleship Iowa, I'm Andrew Tarr for Portfolio.